Okay, we'd like to welcome everyone to our monthly Michigan Peace Council meeting. This is Monday, April 4th, 2022. And we start out our meetings with a discussion with friends and colleagues on hot topics of the day. And certainly the hot topic of today is the war in Ukraine. And more specifically, the U.S. Peace Council, of which we're a member of, we're a chapter of that, put out a statement about the military involvement in the Ukraine, and we all are going to take a shot at trying to give our opinions about what we think about the U.S. Peace Council position, pro or con. And this is a group of friends that are here. We're all allies and activists and friends, and we're going to disagree on some things or not, and that's all right because we want to get at the truth as much as we can. So I want to thank our special guests today, who are members of the Peace Council, Michigan Peace Council. David Smokler, Frank Hammer, and Michele Artt will be speaking their mind, 5 to 7 minutes each. I'm going to start off first, but before we do, I want to mention that this is the anniversary of NATO, 73rd year anniversary today. And NATO certainly plays a big role in this whole problem that we have right now. So we have a U.S. Peace Council statement, and I'm going to time myself so I don't go overboard here. It addresses, it's divided up into 4 or 5 different segments, the U.S. Peace Council statement, and I hope that you all had a chance to read it so that you can understand what we're going to be talking about. It addresses the UN Charter quite heavily in this, and the justification for the Russian involvement in the war is what Russia used Chapter 51, I think, and the U.S. used, and the NATO uses Chapter 2 and others. So it addresses that issue. It also addresses the issue of an inter-imperialist war, if these are two imperialist countries fighting each other. It also addresses the issue of false equivalency of UN and Russian roles in this whole thing. And at the end, it makes 4 demands. And we'll discuss all those things, hopefully, in pro and con. Obviously, we know the U.S. Peace Council has a unique position in the vast land of the left in the anti-war movement, peace movement. There are differences, and I think we want to. Hopefully, these differences will come out here, but also the commonality of what we're all fighting for together. We hope to address these questions, like who, and specifically about this issue in Ukraine. Who started the war? Are both sides to blame? Is it an imperial war? Is it a proxy war? Is it an ideological battle? And what's it mean to be an anti-war activist, an anti-imperialist? I mean, what does that mean? How is that different from others who are not anti-imperialist? So there's those who oppose, there's a segment of the left who oppose the Russian aggression and intervention in Ukraine, and those others who oppose the U.S. NATO aggression, which instigated the Russian aggression, is what they say. Professor John Mearsheimer, I'm sure you're all well aware of his famous piece called "Why the UK Crisis is the West," why the Ukraine crisis is the West's fault, and he uses a famous quote that the U.S. is fighting Russia to the last Ukrainian in this war, and that it's a proxy, and that they're pawns in the battle of geopolitics, much wider battle. So U.S. NATO is, some people have said U.S. NATO is the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today, by far. Compared to what Russia is doing right now, we all know the many wars that the U.S. has been involved in, and recently, certainly in Serbia and Afghanistan, and just name them on and on. We've been in like 120. We've initiated 120 violent confrontations since World War II, and out of I think 128, we were in 100. Out of 248, we started 201 of them, something like that. So our country and our imperialism is well known in the world. So just to sort of round it out, I want to start out by saying Ukraine had a coup in 2014 we all know about. Some people blame that for the start of this and what caused this. There was a Minsk II agreement, which was signed by every side but was not enforced. That people say is one of the problems. And there's also a long history of in Russia, Soviet history of the Nazis coming in and anti-fascism and anti-Nazism, and they see it again. So I think we have to question where we're getting information from. That's another problem that people in the world have, because certain powers that have control over the media are controlling what we get to see and hear, and they're cutting down a lot of websites now that are offering any alternative views. They're still getting a few through, and I just want to mention a few of these, and then I'm going to turn it over to our first speaker. One of them is Oliver Stone's film called Ukraine on Fire. You can get this on YouTube. It's free to watch. It's a powerful film explaining the 2014 coup and what resulted from that. There's another great documentary by a French journalist named Anne-Laure Bonnel. We watched both these films with our film group a couple of weeks ago. It's called Donbass 2016. And you can look that up on YouTube also. That's free. Donbass 2016, a film by Anne-Laure Bonnel. There's an English translation version. You want that one. So there's been many people writing about this. We all have our own favorite friends and websites that we go to, and Twitter and Facebook and everywhere. I know the People's World managing editor John Wojcik wrote an article recently on saying that if we ignore the extreme right, it's very dangerous if we try to overlook the power of the right wing in the Ukraine right now. Also, China's played a major role in trying to stop this war. I appreciate their clear-headed position myself. I think they realize that there could be economic destruction for the whole rest of the world if this thing doesn't end soon. The online sources that I tend to like to go to myself, and I recommend them, if I'm sure you all have some too that I hope you can recommend. I go to the Saker quite often, Saker, the Duran, Duran. There's a one called Smoothie X. These are the people who seem to have the inside information on exactly what's happening on the ground in Ukraine right now. Of course, we all know Gray Zone. We all know Multipolarista website, Ben Norton. We know the Black Agenda Report with Danny Haiphong, the Black Alliance for Peace with Ajamu Baraka, who is on the board of the U.S. Peace Council and did help write this statement. And so did Margaret Flowers, who has a wonderful website called Popular Resistance, and she helped. She is on the board too of the U.S. Peace Council. So I just want to conclude my part by mentioning one of my favorite people online, a writer called Caitlin Johnstone. I think she's so great with words, and much more than I am, for sure. I'm a musician. I know how to play music. I'm not a word artist, but she is a word artist, and I love her writing. Her titles of her pieces tell a lot. So I'm going to just give you 3 titles of her things, and then of her articles, and then we're going to move on to Michele. And one of her articles is called "Ukraine is a Sacrificial Pawn on the Imperial Chessboard." That's one interpretation. Another headline from one of her daily articles is "The U.S. Empire's ultimate target is not Russia, but China." And a third one is, and she can be very sarcastic, satirical. One of her titles is, "Sure, Ukraine is the first war that the U.S. hasn't lied about." So we all know that getting the facts from anywhere is very difficult in these days. So I'm going to, I know we all have different opinions, and we're open now to say whatever you want to say. Please make this a free forum, and we'll share ideas. We'll have discussions with the rest of you after the 3 of our guests here speak, and then we'll open it up to everybody. So Stone-Artt, who was the president of our U.S. Peace Council, of our Michigan Peace Council back in the day, is now with us again, and she has some opinions and feelings about the U.S. Peace Council statement. So, Michele, take it away. You got the floor.
Thank you, Bill. And hello, everybody. First, let me say that I am not an ideologue. I feel a bit bounced back and forth with the many opinions that I've been reading. I've got a stack about 3 inches high that I printed out because I don't read on screen very much. And there are many opinions about who is at fault. But I have been involved in the peace movement since I was 13, which, as you can tell by my white hair, was not recent. One thing that I have learned is that to make change takes a mass movement. It can't be done only by the left, of which I am a member and several other people are too, but you don't have to be a member of the left to want a peaceful world. And we are in a situation now where the Peace Council, nationally and internationally, and certainly in Michigan, needs to find a way of bringing together the largest group of people to oppose the war that is going on from many points of view. And I've been thinking about this in regard to Vietnam. There were people who demonstrated by the tens of thousands in Washington, D.C. Some came to smoke pot on the lawn of the Capitol. Some came because they were threatened with the draft. Others came because they were supporters of the Viet Cong. Others came because they were pacifists. Everybody came because they wanted an end to the war. And in being involved in building coalitions over much of my life, I have found that it takes everybody to get together and make change. So whatever we write and whatever we publicize has to be with broad appeal. It's good that we're discussing these issues, but I don't see the peace movement in its largest sense as raising the issue of imperialism as an issue that tens of thousands are going to agree to and participate in. I have to say that over the statement of, in regard to the statement by the U.S. Peace Council, I found it extremely complicated. What I liked better was the statement of the World Peace Council, which actually was written the 25th of February of this year. I think that it's much more clear. It states very strongly it is against the expansion of NATO and the incorporation of Ukraine into it. But it also is appalled by the war, by the developments in the Ukraine and the military escalation. I have put them side by side and thought, well, what expresses better to me the issues that we have at hand? And I certainly think the statement to the World Peace Council is more appropriate. We are trying to win over many people in our country. Most people in this country think NATO's okay. I think that we're amongst a small number, although growing, and that's good. But how we place things, I think, is extremely important. I am not about to defend Putin. I think that what was done is a horror. It has taken us to a situation that could lead, though I don't think it will, but could lead to nuclear war. But I'm not about to condemn him and write him off. I think there are issues that explain, though not condone, but explain the thinking that he has. But I would turn more towards the warmongers in all the countries who make their profits off weaponry and certainly our congresspersons who have stock in the companies that are being sold to countries who war against each other and keep the name of the US out of it. So I don't want to use up any more time, but I just wanted to put those few things in the discussion and be happy to listen to everybody else and participate later.
Great. Thank you so much, Michele, for starting it out. I appreciate that. So just to let people know the ground rules here, we're going to let Frank speak for 5 to 7 minutes, David next, and then Frank 5 to 7 minutes each, and then we're going to open it up to everyone to speak, and you will raise your hand or your icon to be recognized, and I'll unmute you. At this point, no one can unmute themselves, just so we don't have any interruptions. So at this point, we're going to move on to David Smokler. Who worked, I didn't get a bio for all these guys because I know them so well. I like our closest friend, but I know David. These are all hardcore activists here. So without the bio, you all know these people probably without me telling you. But David works with a group called LRNA, and you might want to mention that and explain that. And other than that, go ahead and say whatever you want to say, David. Thank you for being here.
The LRNA is the, pardon me, League of Revolutionaries for New America. I want to start off by saying it's very difficult, as Bill mentioned, to really get the facts of what's going on. Ray McGovern calls it Mickey Math, the military, industrial, congressional intelligence, media, academia, think tank complex. So I go to the same websites that Bill goes to, and based upon the information that I've received, I want to say the following. We know that the U.S. is a warmonger, has been a warmonger from day one, when they genocided the native peoples of this country, when they enslaved the Africans, and they've been in war for our entire existence, except for 15 years. I think the U.S. Peace Council makes a colorable legal argument, and I agree with it. I think that the United Nations Charter, based upon what the Peace Council has said, does support the Soviet special operation, the Russian special operation in the Ukraine. What is the evidence? Well, Bill mentioned the 2014 coup, where Victoria Nuland and others, Victoria admitted that she put $5 million or $5 billion into the Ukraine, overthrew the elected government of the Ukraine. The Nazis in the Ukraine played a key role in that coup. They may be only 10% of the population, but they were 90% of the people that enabled the coup. They're armed, they're violent, and they attacked the troops they attacked the police actually in Kiev. They were responsible for the coup, and then they got incorporated into the Ukrainian military. They got incorporated into the National Guard, and they have units of the Nazis in every battalion in the National Guard, influencing the course of their military strategy. And for 8 years now, they've bombarded Donetsk and Lugansk, 14,000 deaths. So what's happened recently is really the culmination of an 8-year struggle. The people of Donetsk and Lugansk have been suffering for 8 years. President Putin calls this genocide. They passed laws in the during the last administration outlawing the language, the Russian language. So I think that there was ample reasons to go into the Ukraine. The research that I've shown says that there were at least 60,000 troops on the border of Donetsk and Lugansk, that they were getting ready to invade them. We've now learned that they had biolabs in the Ukraine, specialized in biological warfare, and there's evidence that people become sick as a result of this. The Zelensky has indicated that he's interested in getting nuclear weapons. So this is a critical situation, very critical situation. We noticed at the UN, when there was a vote condemning the invasion, the people that voted with the United States are all former colonial countries or their underlings. The people that voted against were the people from Africa, Asia, Latin America, because they know what colonialism is. They know what oppression is. I would argue that this situation represents a tectonic shift. It's not just they want to destroy Russia, dismember Russia, and then get to China. What they are doing is trying to maintain this imperial structure, trying to maintain the status quo that's existed for 500 years. The former colonies have won their independence, and now they're developing. And every country that tries to develop, whether it be Nicaragua, Venezuela, Bolivia, faces an attack by the United States. They want to maintain the status quo and prevent these countries from liberating the forces of production. I believe that we are in a nodal point of a shift from the West controlling the world to a multipolar world of equality, and that's why they want to attack China. That's why they want to attack Russia, because they want to preserve this status quo. We know that China, a former semi-colony, now has been growing, expanding, developing with new technology, is sharing that technology with members of the former colonial world, and they want to develop, they want to feed their people, they want to have a multipolar world. And this is a battle to prevent that. It's not just a battle against Russia. It's not just a battle to get to China. It's a battle that prevents a new epoch, a new world where the former colonial countries begin to industrialize, are industrializing, and people are dealt with, nations are dealt with on the basis of equality. Thank you.
David, that was superb and right on time. Thank you so much. That's David's opinion, loaded with some facts. We've heard from Michele and David. Now we're going to hear from our friend Frank Hammer, who I don't know where to start with given his bio. I mean, he's involved in many things, of course. We know he's involved in labor struggles, activism, Latin American struggles, just on and on. So I don't know which group I want to pick for you, Frank. You can say what you want. So here you go. You got 5 to 7 minutes. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And the reason I'm here is because you invited me to be here. You blame it purely on you. And the reason I agreed is not because I feel like I have a lot of expertise on what's going on in Ukraine, but because I think it is, as has already been said, this is a very pivotal moment. And it's important for us to have this discussion, to have debate, and to try to get clarity and to understand what our roles are as activists, long-term activists in the belly of the U.S. empire. So I don't have a prepared comments. I just have a lot of kind of scattered thoughts that I want to put together a little bit here. One is that the general position, and this is the position of a website that I've very rarely visited, but I thought to do it in this case, called the International League of People's Struggle, which laid out their position, which I thought was substantial, and they described it as the current military conflict in Ukraine is between U.S., NATO, and the ultra-nationalist Zelensky regime against the people of Donbass, Crimea, and Russia. The US, European Union, NATO, and Russia have their own imperialist interests to pursue in the armed conflict in Ukraine. And it goes on to talk about it's very rich in natural resources, the country is abundant in minerals and energy resources, and so on. And it lists a whole bunch. It has the largest arable land in Europe, and it's producing so many agricultural products for exports, it still has a vast rail network and produces capital goods such as power, energy, turbines. It is one of the reasons why imperialist countries are drooling to control and want to dominate Ukraine. And I think that I want to look at it in terms of spheres of influence, and that this is what's coming into a collision in Ukraine with the U.S. Forever, along with the European Union, being an expansionist power that is just gobbling up country after country. And I want to kind of push back a little bit what Brother Smokler said, that, boy, I wish it was just about maintaining the status quo, but it's not, right? It's constantly an imperialist expansion that's gobbling up more and more territory and more countries. But I understood the spirit of what you were saying, of course. So this International League of People's Struggle is against the imperialist war in Ukraine. The U.S. NATO intervention and aggression in Ukraine should be opposed, while Russia should respect the sovereignty of Ukraine and its people. Along with these calls, we firmly support the right of the people of Crimea, Donetsk, Luhansk, and the rest of Donbas region to self-determination and national liberation. No to imperialist wars. Fight U.S. NATO intervention in Ukraine. And I thought that does a reasonably good job of capturing some of the essential fault lines in what we're looking at. I think one of our roles is to combat the narrative, the overwhelming narrative, that we're just drowning in regards to things like the U.S. media declaring that this is a war between freedom and tyranny, or that the idea that this is an unprovoked war. I even saw, and it's seen it over and over and over, a video of a Russian tank with a Soviet flag on it. And it's probably the only tank in Ukraine that's got that flag. And they show it over and over as if it's still a carryover from the Cold War and a carryover from the U.S. combat with the Soviet Union, which of course it's not. It's another capitalist imperialist power. I think that there are many causes, including the coup, but also abrogation of the treaties that the U.S. has stepped away from, that opened up the threshold for nuclear weapon expansion, which has been so horribly overlooked as just negligible factoids in the media, but in fact have grave consequences. I find that the issue of the coup in 2014, it's really amazing that we have a country and a media certainly that's been paralyzed by the attempted coup in January 6th of last year, and yet can't grasp the idea that there was in fact a coup engineered with the help of the US in Ukraine in 2014. And yet we talk about how we have to respect the freedom of the Ukrainian people for self-determination and so on. So all this media wash that completely transforms what we're looking at and what other Americans, people in the US are looking at, is very critical for us to be able to combat. And I would like to just say one other thing and quit. One thing that is very, of course, not viewed is the role of something called the National Endowment for Democracy. Popular Resistance had a really excellent piece on the role of this so-called non-governmental, very much governmental institute that has played a role in promoting democracy in Ukraine. And I want to just end that I thought the death of Madeleine Albright was very, very timely, because she was cited for her quote that the 500,000 lives of children in Iraq was a good choice, because we have to make hard choices, but we didn't mind the loss of life of 500,000 children in Iraq as a counterpoint to what we're talking about now. Pardon me?
It was worth it.
It was worth it. Yeah. Anyway, I'll end with that. Look forward to more conversation, and I would add one other note. I think if we talk to the U.S. public about capitalism and imperialism being a form of an addiction, and that we have mega powers that have that addiction, and that we have to, combat an addiction, that people might have a better way of understanding what's going on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Frank, and thank you to Michele and David. And I'll play moderator from now on here. I just want to say that, of course, we've got a load of people here in this group that all have great experience in activism, and I respect all of you for being here, and you all have something to say. I just had to pick 3 people so that we could start out with this, because we need a discussion. We all need to talk, and I know you all have stuff to contribute. So I sure hope that you do, and somehow we got to keep the comments sort of short so that we can finish in a half an hour. And so now I was going to give a minute to the 4 of us. If anyone of the 4 of us wanted to ask each other a question of something that we had said up till now, this would be the time to do it. If you can think of anything you want to say back to someone after you had spoke.
I've got something I want to say.
Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah. The status quo is capitalism and imperialism gobbling up countries.
Right.
That's what they've done from the beginning. That's what they're continuing to do. But we're at a stage in history now, particularly with digital technology, where the countries that they once dominated are winning their freedom and developing. And they want to maintain the status quo. They want to continue gobbling up countries and being the hegemon of the world. And it's not just, and again, I want to repeat, it's not just Russia. People say they want to go through Russia, dismember Russia, make it into several countries, and then go after China. Because China and Russia are really leading the change that's happening in the world. They're helping Venezuela. They're helping all the countries that are trying to develop and feed their people and create modern societies. And the Belt and Road Initiative is something that's very important to understand, because China is helping the African countries to develop. They're supporting all these countries, and so is Russia. So I think it's really an attack on what we used to call the third world. The theater right now is Russia. They need to be stopped there. One more point too, fascism. We're seeing the development of fascism in this country. We see that the US uses fascists whenever it can, uses dictators, Somoza, Batista, Trujillo. And in this situation, they're using this Stephen Bandera group. Stephen Bandera fought with the Nazis in World War II. His group was responsible for 100,000 deaths. And the United States had a stay behind policy where it continued to nourish these groups until now. They brought them out now. And so I think that fascism is a big issue that we need to understand. The last stage of capitalism is fascism. Thank you.
I thought it was imperialism.
Well, imperialism, it is imperialism.
Yeah, you're right.
But the way they rule, they can't rule anymore with this so-called democracy we have. They rule with the club.
Well, that's funny, because I came up with a question to myself today. What did they call fascism? Marx never used the word fascism. That didn't come until Italy and Mussolini. So what was that called before there was fascism? It was called imperialism.
Well, imperialism is a special thing,
Okay.
but fascism is another thing. And we see what happened in Italy, what happened in Germany, what happened in Japan, and what's happening here. And we will use, really, it's a police state. It's a racist police state that's the culmination of Western so-called democracy.
All right. Well, so we know this is a big subject. There's lots of things to address we haven't done in a long time, and I'm so glad that we have a chance to cover some of them. This statement, the U.S. Peace Council statement, had a lot in it, and we didn't address everything in the statement, which was just a stepping stone for the discussion here. But I did want to bring forward again the last 4 demands that the statement made was to immediate ceasefire, a recognition of neutrality, a withdrawal of all foreign military weapons and equipment, and then a resumption of negotiations. Those 4 demands were at the end of this statement. This statement went around and had a lot of controversy in some places, but this Peace Council statement has been around the world and been seen and read by a lot of people. So I'm glad that it is getting the discussion going. So now we're going to open up to our friends, and this is the way we'll do it. Yes, just like they did. Raise your hand, the little icon at the bottom, go to reactions, and there's a little thing in there called raise hand. And I'll just go down the line. If you don't have the raise button, you don't know how to do that, then just frantically wave your hand like this, and I'll see that you want to talk. So we want to keep it as short as possible, but say what you really want to say. So we got Sherry, then we got Tobin. So let's start with Sherry. Go ahead, Sherry.
I only want to say thank you. I was totally ignorant. I knew that NATO existed. I didn't know anything more about it. It was just there. I didn't know anything positive, negative, or anything. I thought it started with World War II and the US helping Britain and all this other. I had no idea it grew and what it's been doing. Thank you very much. And whatever I learn, I have ways of passing it on to other people to educate them like you've educated me.
Thank you, Sherry. Appreciate that. Yes, NATO, we have a campaign in the Peace Council, No to NATO, and that's one of our actions. So we'll be working on that for sure with our group. And by the way, I want to thank most of you are members, but if you're not, don't forget to join the Peace Council if you can, and stick around for after the discussion. We're going to have a regular membership meeting after this ends. So continuing on. Hi, Tobin. How you doing? Go ahead.
Yeah, doing well, thank you. I want to thank you and thank everybody who's spoken and who showed up today for this. A vital discussion. Yeah, I was, and I want to thank. I was reminded earlier today, I think, by Michele's comments that I had seen the World Peace Council statement right there, and was wondering why the U.S. Peace Council statement wording seemed different from what I had read before. And I bring that up just because I kind of hypothetically draw what conversation would look like if I had to try to explain this to somebody. And it's kind of it's difficult. I'm trying because I'm learning as I try to explain to others who are interested and will listen. But yeah, it was. I think the thing that really got me about this was how quickly. Well, we can see the reach that the United States has, and just in terms of the amount of sanctions that came down, some of the most draconian measures that were being reported, and I cite Consortium News as another good subject on this right there. They got a lot of speakers, a lot of viewpoints, people coming from the sources already mentioned. But the one thing that that blinkered me and how effective it was how media managed to suppress. I mean, in the public consciousness, the memory of the last 8 years. Right, even though there's ample record of it, what happened, they managed to make it go away. So I'm seeing. I'll cruise Twitter every now and again, sometimes against my better judgment. But you can see how the conversation is shaped from people who just don't have that knowledge right there. And it's fascinating, it's scary, but it's also an opportunity to educate. And it's tough to do when this is ongoing. And you're learning new things we're learning new things about what's unfolding every day. But it has to be done.
Yeah, thanks, Tobin. Thanks for being here. Okay, next on the lineup is Richard Fahum. Hi, Richard. How you doing?
I'm doing good, Bill. Thank you.
Yes.
I agree with most of the things that everybody has said. A couple of things that I've been thinking about. The whole NATO alliance was built after the end of the Soviet Union, from what I understand. And they never did rebuild the Warsaw Pact. So Russia has always taken a strong position that they did not want NATO moving east, which they are. They've developed their forces. They're on the border of Russia at this time. And I think about the collective consciousness of the Russian people losing 27 million people, I think, to Nazism in World War II. I think that's an important aspect of this struggle. I think that Putin is trying to defend his country. The other point that I want to make is that I think the U.S. is in deep economic problems, and I think with the arrangement of Russia and China and India and many other countries that the Belt and Road is bringing together, I think it is really making the economic crisis that the U.S. is in very acute. I don't think that they have the ability to exploit and go after countries and pay their bills in their usual manner. A lot of that is because I think one of the most important things about this arrangement with China and Russia is that they have the finances to back up the projects that they're developing. I'll just take it that far. If anybody has anything else to add to what I just said, please.
Yeah, Richard, that was great. Thanks for your points. Really appreciate it. There's so many things we can't cover everything. So thanks for bringing those up for sure. And now we'll go to our friend Damon, who moved away from us, and he lives now all the way over in Lansing or somewhere near there. Hi, David. Damon, how's the temperature out there?
It's cold and it was snowy.
Come back.
I wanted to kind of follow up on what Richard was talking about, because I think we always have to look at that the economy and the economics of what's taking place globally. And I'm a member of the League of Revolutionaries for a New America, and we started recognizing the introduction of robots and computers back in the late 70s and the effect that it could have on the capitalist system. And now we see that this whole electronic robotic revolution is replacing human labor as we know it. And that should be a good thing. But the reality is it's being used against us. And I think that when you look at China, you look at Russia, you look at the technological revolution, they're all competing with each other to be able to produce more with fewer workers. And this is creating a crisis of capital that hasn't come about in decades or hundreds of years that capitalism has been around. Our understanding and our position is that capitalism is coming to an end as an economic system, because it can no longer take profit from surplus value, which is the value they take from the working class who produces, or up to this time, had produced all the goods that the profits were squeezed from. So they're trying to figure out where are they going to be able to continue these profits. And these imperialist countries, these imperialist systems are like big leeches on the globe. They need fresh blood to continue to survive. And so, and war is inevitable under this system and has been inevitable under this system. But it's really quite scary. And I would just touch on one other thing. Having been a part of the corporate media at the Detroit Free Press for many years, I know how it works inside. And I've never seen such a full court press around the question of war and Ukraine. I mean, the Vietnam War was the first time you started to see televised aspects of the war, but you never saw how it was affecting the Vietnamese people. You never saw stories about what they were suffering. And for the US now to do this in Ukraine, it's incredible. I mean, they've created a narrative that's going to be very difficult for us to overcome. But at a certain point, especially with the internet now, it's harder and harder for them to tell their lies and keep people in this country ignorant and baffled. And I'll just give a couple examples of that. One, there was a story that came out maybe the first week about the biological labs in the Ukraine. And in defense of them, I saw people say, well, you know, biological labs, that's how they find cures for polio and smallpox. And then as things evolved and the story kept coming out and the truth started coming to the surface, you started to see that an admission by the US that they were in fact involved in biological weapons research in the Ukraine. And I think more and more we are going to see at a certain point, just like we did in every previous situation or war. I mean, when we were out there in the beginning, the Vietnam War calling for peace, and Iraq and Afghanistan, you know, people would shout at us and do all kinds of stuff. But as this thing continued, then the truth starts to win out. And as it starts to affect the American working class, the high gas prices, the inflation, all these different things, they're going to support this war for so long. And then at a certain point, they're going to have to start to question, why is this happening and why is it affecting us? That's it for me.
Oh, great, Damon. Thank you so much. And now we have our dear friend Sharon Feldman, who's going to join us. Thank you, Sharon, for being here. Go ahead. You got the floor.
Thank you. I'm so grateful for this talk tonight. I'm going to go from sort of the feelings of being in a situation where I mean, I haven't been able to turn on the TV. I haven't been able to watch the news. It really makes me so sick that I physically ill. I get physically ill at the lies. And I think back to the Vietnam War when I was young. I was part of the youth. And it felt, you really had a feeling of cohesion and that you could say whatever you wanted to say because you had this whole group around you and behind you. You could see how uncourageous I am. And then the Iraqi war, how you know, all my friends went to Washington and we were demonstrating and we knew about the lies and we were able to talk about it, and it was really comfortable. Well, not comfortable, but it was not horrible. And then for me, you know, standing up against Israel and supporting the Palestinians, I lost every Jewish friend I had. I don't have any Jewish friends anymore because they really can't stand me for my views on Israel. And I was able to tolerate that. And now with this whole thing, the lies are, you know, it's like, what is the truth? There's these bodies they drag out. Are they staged? Are they not staged? Some people on the extreme left are saying, well, you know, the Ukrainian people are just fodder for this whole thing and the US, and we just can't help that. And I mean, I feel bad that all those people are dying. And I had, you know, my sister stood by me through all these changes I've been through, but she wasn't able to tolerate hearing about what's going on in Yugoslavia. I mean, in Ukraine. And I maybe it's the pandemic and I'm so isolated, and I really have isolated myself. I just feel so alone in this. And you know, I don't know where my group is that's going to be fighting this and standing up. I mean, Twyla says amazing things online. I think she's just so courageous putting stuff out there the way she does. But it's hard. You know, I have a few friends I can talk to, but I don't know how everybody else feels. I just feel overwhelmed. And it's nice. I'm watching other movies, I'm doing other things, but it's just really a horror, this whole thing. And it's overwhelming. And I don't know how people are dealing with it emotionally. That's all.
Well, that's why I love you, Sharon, because you remind us that we're all human beings, and this is not just political discussion. These are people talking. These are people with feelings and emotions, and you have them. We all have them. And I think you could pretty much count most of us in this group here as your friend. And I think
Yes.
I think you can count every Jew who supports the BDS movement as your Jewish friend. So you don't think you're out there alone. You're not. And I'm feel that way sometimes too, but you can find them. You go look there, and there's many, many people who would support this position that we're taking and that we're concerned about. And I want to mention now that I don't see any other hands up, but I do want to say that this question always interests me of how the U.S. Peace Council or the Michigan Peace Council is different than the rest of the people in the rest of the groups in the peace movement. In the sense of the fact that I think this group, why do we need another group? In other words, there's many peace groups. Why do we need a U.S. Peace Council? Well, I think because we're the ones that also offer an anti-imperialist analysis more than most groups. I mean, there are other peace groups that address imperialism, but I think this group addresses it more than any. And another very important factor is that I don't think this group is an anti-communist left group. This group allows communists, Marxists, socialists, and anybody who wants to fight against war to be in this group. And there's no anti-communism here. And that's important to me. And I think that those are at least two factors that make this group different than most others. But we can work with everybody on common ground. And I did want to mention, and we'll talk about it in our meeting after, but there's a group called the Michigan Peace Alliance that has been formed with several groups in Michigan that we're starting to network with and Sharon for sure. And many of us here will want to check that out and find other groups that we can work with. So good, we got some hands up. Let's hear from Frank. Go ahead, Frank. Oh, I unmuted you. Okay, there you go.
Let Steve and Twyla speak.
Okay, then we'll come back to you. Okay, Steve, go ahead.
I value consistency very highly. I'm not here to defend the mainstream media, which I think the American media is just as bad as the Russian media. And I'm certainly not here to defend the expansion of NATO. But I think people should be consistent. If you're going to defend Putin's attack on the Ukraine, then I think you need to defend the Israeli leadership when they attack the Palestinians. And you might as well go ahead and defend George Bush when he attacked Iraq and did the same shock and awe that Putin tried to do on the Ukraine. I also don't like hypocrisy. So I've attacked Biden. I've emailed him a number of times. If he doesn't think Putin has some concerns about security vis-a-vis the Ukraine, then why are we still boycotting Cuba because they're a communist regime? I think that's just as ridiculous. So it seems to me, in a sense of consistency, if you're against imperialism, you're against all imperialism, whether it's the United States or it's Russia.
All right, well, there you threw some logs in the fire. All right, so let's go from there. Let's thank you, Steve, for your outspoken opinions, and that's what we all want. Speak your mind here, folks. So here's Twyla. I know you real well. Hi, Twyla.
I was just going to say that about the confusion many people feel because it's like an imperialist, one imperialist nation fighting another imperialist nation by way of the Ukraine, and it's a confusing dynamic that people are having a hard time, figuring out what's real. I disagree with Steve. I believe about the hearing information that is opposite or different from what the United States media is putting out there. I think the other side has the truth somehow, much more than the United States is putting out there in media. The local stuff, like Women in Black and our organization, like with Women in Black, there's this idea of anti-communism that runs through even peace groups. And it hasn't come out as strongly in our group as it has since this Ukraine problem has come up. And, it kind of gets confused and people don't really know at this point, they don't want to be associated with communism, even if they're peace people. And that's just a really difficult, those ideas are really difficult to overcome. And I know I like to just, when I'm with people, I just like to kind of give them snappy remarks and, kind of put them down a little bit for their anti-communism. And here you're supposed to be a peacenik, and how can you be so against, what most of the world actually believes in? And oh well. Anyway, so I think that idea of anti-communism is our biggest struggle within peace groups and anti-war groups, especially at this point where Putin and the old Soviet Union and the idea of those ideas are involved. So that's all I have to say.
Yeah, thanks, Dwight. And I agree. That is a very important issue. And I think an interesting fact is that, since Russia is not a communist country, and we always seem to have been fighting communism, that's what the Cold War was. Now all of a sudden we're still fighting Russia, and they're a capitalist country. So, I mean, who exactly is the enemy of U.S. imperialism? Is it communism? Or is it just anybody who's going to threaten global hegemony? I think that's what the problem is. It's the financial challenge. It doesn't matter if you're a Muslim country, if you're a capitalist country, a communist country. If you're not going to work with the U.S. empire, you're an enemy, and we're going to wipe you out. I think that's, we know, but many of us believe in the class struggle, and certainly that's still the factor. But it's not clear to a lot of people. They got fooled when all of a sudden the U.S. is not. Who's the enemy? It's Putin. He's not a communist. So wait a minute. Is communism the problem? So let's hear from Frank. Go ahead, Frank.
I had wanted to say one thing, and then I wanted to respond to what Twyla said. And I want to say that I was glad that David brought up the question of fascism. And I connect the question of fascism intimately with anti-communism. And one of the things that went on in Ukraine, going back to 2014, was the outlawing of left parties. And that is the essence of fascism, is to crush the left and to crush the workers' movement. And those are the means by which they do it. And it's in line with what Twyla was just saying about how our country is, riddled with anti-communism. And it's kind of like, even certainly during the Trump era, attacks against communists, when there's not even a communist movement in the U.S., but they still attack communism. The other thing I wanted to say was, I think, and I know, Bill, that you were wanting to focus a little bit of attention on the demands. I think one of the things that is the media has really squelched is any discussion in the U.S. government, any real discussion about the climate catastrophe and all the reports that have been coming out from the IPCC, talking about that we're sleepwalking into a catastrophe, and the war has been this wonderful distraction. I mean, if anybody, saw Don't Look Up, that's one hell of a way for us to not look up, is to be fixated on this war that marginalizes any conversation, any sense of gravity about, the warming, the heating of the planet. And then, of course, there's also the question of nuclear winter. So it just piles on. But I think that's a very important thing to have as part of the demands of the World Peace Council, that the planet is gripped in a crisis and wars are just not affordable.
Thanks, Frank. So we're going to close out the conversation unless somebody else has something more to say. We're going to let David and Michele also say any final words on or remarks, comments of anything that's been said. You're welcome to speak last here. Michele and David, go ahead.
David, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Damon put a good post up, and that is fascism is imperialism turned inward. I think that's a good point. And I'll just reiterate, I think a new world is coming. The former colonial world is developing, and the old powers that be don't want that to happen. I think there is a possibility and a probability, if we stay strong, of a new world coming into existence, a multipolar world where all nations are equal, where we share technology. And I think that the struggle now is between the new world that is being born, which ultimately will be socialist, and the old world that presently exists. And Ukraine is a battlefront in that struggle. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
I just want to remind folks that watching what happens with energy, gas and oil, and who owns it, who controls it, who needs it and isn't getting it, the cost of it, are important issues during this period of time. And then again, let me go back to my opening remarks, that formulating demands that we can take to our government, because we really don't have any control. We have little control with our government, but we certainly have no control over anybody else's, nor should we. It's not our area to have control. Speaking of imperialism, I mean, that would be the height of the opposite of what a peace organization should be. But to formulate the demands for a negotiated peace, for guaranteeing neutral borders, that there are a number of things that we really need to raise and then figure out how to approach ordinary folks who aren't activists, haven't become activists yet, and include them in the struggle. And I think that that's an important role that we can play, understanding all of these very deep issues. So thanks a lot.
Okay, and thank you, Michele and David and Frank, for accepting my invitation to be part of the panel, because we're all have something to say, and we all should have a chance to speak out, and I appreciate you all for doing that. And if you didn't get a chance to, there's always time to do that. We're going to take a 2-minute break, and it's going to continue on with our membership meeting. For those of you who are members, please stick around. For those who aren't members, please stick around, and it's going to be a very short meeting, but we have to cover a couple things. And so give me 2 minutes to get that set up, and then we'll start. Thank you again for everybody for being here. The recording is ending right now.